December 8, 1941, 9:10 a.m. Imperial Japanese Navy Headquarters, Tokyo. The room hums with quiet satisfaction. Maps stretch across polished tables. Red pins mark recent victories. Pearl Harbor still burns in distant reports, and already the mood has shifted from tension to calculation. Officers in crisp uniforms lean over charts of the Pacific, their voices calm, precise, almost casual. Vice Admiral Matome Ugaki stands beside Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, his gloved hand resting lightly on a ruler tracing distance across the ocean. The numbers are reassuring. Vast distances. Impossible distances. You see, Ugaki says, tapping the map near Hawaii, their fleet is crippled. Their shipyards are too far. Even if they rebuild it will take years. A staff officer nearby adjusts his glasses, scanning a fresh intelligence summary. American industrial capacity is large, yes, but slow to mobilize. Political hesitation. Isolationist sentiment. A quiet chuckle passes through the room. Yamamoto does not laugh. He watches the map in silence, eyes lingering not on Pearl Harbor, but far beyond it toward the western coast of the United States. Toward places most men in this room have never seen. But the others speak over that silence. Commander Minoru Genda, architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, gestures confidently. Their Pacific fleet has been dealt a decisive blow. Without battleships, they cannot contest control of the ocean, another officer adds. And their carriers were absent. Lucky, perhaps, but they cannot replace losses quickly. Their shipyards are not prepared for wartime production at scale. No one challenges that statement, because it feels true. Across the Pacific at that exact moment, the United States Navy is in chaos. Radio chatter fills the air around damaged installations. Oil slicks burn across the harbor. Sailors scramble across decks blackened by smoke and fire. But far from Hawaii, something else is happening. At the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, Virginia workers are already moving. You can hear the clang of steel before you see the ships. Welding torches flare to life. Blueprints are unrolled across drafting tables. Engineers argue over timelines that no longer matter. Deadlines are no longer months or years. They are now measured in urgency. Rear Admiral Samuel M. Robinson, Chief of the Bureau of Ships, stands in a crowded office, sleeves rolled, voice sharp. We are not replacing losses. We are expanding. An engineer hesitates. Sir, the current production schedules. Throw them out. Robinson cuts in. Everything changes now. Back in Tokyo, none of this is visible. Instead, intelligence briefings paint a different picture. American factories are described as vast but inefficient. Their democracy is portrayed as slow, divided, reluctant to sustain prolonged war. Lieutenant Commander Takejiro Onishi reviews reports with a faint smile. They will negotiate, he says. They always do. They lack the spirit for attrition. The assumption settles into the room like fact. War in their minds will be swift, strategic, controlled. A decisive strike here, a calculated expansion there. Then negotiations. Yamamoto finally speaks. If we are to fight, he says quietly, we must win quickly. The room falls still, because his tone carries something the others do not want to acknowledge. Doubt. But it is dismissed just as quickly. Of course, Ugaki replies. And we will. The maps remain unchanged. The red pins stay fixed. The distances still look insurmountable. Across the Pacific at Mare Island Naval Shipyard in California, a different kind of map is being drawn. You can hear the pounding of rivets echoing across the dry docks. Steel plates are lowered into place with precise coordination. Workers move in shifts that no longer end. Day blends into night under artificial light. A young naval architect studies a hull design pencil, tapping nervously. If we modify the framing here, he says, we can cut construction time by weeks. His supervisor nods. Do it. We don't have time for perfection. Nearby, the skeleton of a new destroyer begins to take shape. Fast, lean, efficient, and one of many. But in Tokyo, the focus remains elsewhere. Reports arrive detailing rapid Japanese advances across Southeast Asia. The Philippines, Malaya, the Dutch East Indies. Each success reinforces the belief that momentum is unstoppable. At a strategy meeting, a senior officer points to a timeline. 6 months, he says. Within 6 months, we will have secured our defensive perimeter. After that, the Americans will have no choice but to accept reality. No one questions the timeline. No one asks what happens after those 6 months. Instead, discussions turn to logistics. Fuel supplies, carrier rotations, air superiority. Every plan assumes that the enemy will weaken, not grow stronger. That assumption is never written down. It does not need to be. It is everywhere, in the tone of their voices, in the confidence of their posture, in the quiet certainty that the Pacific Ocean itself is an ally. Far away in a shipyard along the Mississippi River, a foreman wipes sweat from his brow as he watches another keel laid into position. "You think we can keep this pace?" a worker asks. The foreman doesn't look away from the ship. "We don't have a choice," he says. The river carries the sound of construction downstream, hammering, cutting, welding, a rhythm that does not stop. More ships? Not one, not two, but dozens, then hundreds. Back in Tokyo, the meetings conclude with polite bows and measured optimism. Plans are finalized, operations scheduled, assumptions reinforced. As the officers file out, Yamamoto remains behind for a moment, his gaze fixed on the map. The Pacific still looks vast, still looks empty, still looks like a barrier no nation could cross repeatedly, relentlessly, without breaking. But somewhere beyond that horizon, unseen and unaccounted for, a different reality is already forming. One that does not move slowly, one that does not hesitate, one that does not stop. And no one in this room truly understands what that means, not yet. January 23rd, 1942. 6:40 a.m. Pacific Ocean, west of Oahu. The sea is calm, almost deceptively so. A faint orange glow stretches across the horizon as the sun begins to rise. The wind moves steadily across the deck of the USS Enterprise CF-6, carrying with it the constant vibration of engines running at sustained speed. On the flight deck, sailors move with quiet urgency. You can hear the metallic clatter of tools, the sharp snap of signal flags, and the low hum of aircraft engines warming up in sequence. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey stands near the island structure, binoculars pressed to his eyes. His voice is calm, but there is tension beneath it. "Launch window in 3 minutes, he says. Behind him, Douglas, SBD. Dauntless dive bombers sit in a precise line, wings folded like resting birds, waiting for release. Ground crews move quickly, checking fuel lines, securing bombs, tightening bolts that cannot fail once the aircraft leaves the deck. No one here believes the war will be short. That illusion burned away weeks ago. But across the ocean, that belief still lingers. In Tokyo, a naval intelligence briefing unfolds under soft electric light. Lieutenant Commander Yoshikazu Nagano flips through a stack of intercepted reports. His brow tightens slightly as he reads, then smooths again as he prepares to speak. American carrier activity remains limited, he says. Their forces appear scattered. No coordinated counteroffensive has been detected. A senior officer nods. As expected. Nagano hesitates just for a moment. There are indications of increased shipyard activity along the west coast. The room remains quiet. How significant, another officer asks. Nagano chooses his words carefully. Difficult to quantify. Production reports are inconsistent. That is enough. Inconsistency is interpreted as weakness. The officer waves a dismissive hand. Their industrial system is chaotic. It will take time for them to organize. No one presses further. The report is filed. The concern fades. Back aboard the Enterprise, the first aircraft roars down the deck. You can feel the vibration through the steel as the Dauntless accelerates, engines screaming at full power. For a brief moment, it seems suspended between flight and failure. Then it lifts wheels, clearing the deck by inches before climbing into the morning sky. One after another, the aircraft follow. Each launch is a controlled risk. Each successful takeoff is a small victory. Captain George D. Murray watches from the bridge, his expression unreadable. "Keep the launches tight," he orders. "We cannot afford delays." The Enterprise is not alone. Somewhere beyond the horizon, other American ships move in coordinated patterns. Their positions shifting constantly, avoiding detection, preparing for strikes that are still being planned. This is not a broken fleet. It is a fleet adapting. In Tokyo, discussions continue to focus on expansion. Maps now show Japanese forces advancing deeper into Southeast Asia. The Philippines are collapsing. Singapore is under threat. The Dutch East Indies are within reach. Each victory reinforces the same conclusion. The Americans are retreating. At a strategy session, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo reviews operational updates from the carrier strike force. Our momentum is intact, he says. Enemy resistance is disorganized. An aide adds, there has been no significant naval engagement since Pearl Harbor. Nagumo nods. Then we proceed as planned. No one mentions the carriers that were not at Pearl Harbor. No one asks where they are now. Instead, attention shifts to the next objective. But elsewhere, small details begin to accumulate. At the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard, a destroyer slides into the water weeks ahead of its original schedule. Workers line the dock exhausted but silent, watching the hull settle into the harbor. A supervisor checks his clipboard, then shakes his head slightly. We shaved 23 days, he says. Another worker replies, next one will be faster. This is not reported clearly. It appears in fragments. Numbers without context. Timelines without explanation. In Tokyo, those fragments are filtered through expectation, and expectation reshapes them into something harmless. Back in the Pacific, radio chatter fills the air inside the Enterprise. Scout planes report no contact. Maintain course. Fuel status nominal. Every message is precise, controlled, professional. But beneath that control, something is building. Experience, coordination, confidence that is not based on assumption but on action. You can hear it in the voices. Short, direct, certain. Lieutenant Commander McCluskey lowers his binoculars and turns to an ensign. They think we are still reeling, he says quietly. The ensign nods. Are we? McCluskey looks out over the open ocean where the last aircraft disappears into the distance. Not anymore. Far away in Tokyo, Yamamoto receives a separate report. It is brief. American ship production estimates have been revised upward. He reads it once. Then again. The numbers are still incomplete, still uncertain, but they are higher than expected. He folds the paper slowly. What is your assessment? He asks an aide. The aide answers carefully. It may be exaggerated. Yamamoto does not respond immediately, because he understands something the others do not. Exaggerations can go in both directions. Underestimation is just as dangerous. But the machinery of planning is already in motion. Operations have timelines. Logistics have limits. Strategies are built on assumptions that cannot be easily changed. At the next briefing, the report is mentioned briefly, then set aside. Focus returns to immediate objectives, short-term victories. Controlled engagements, the idea that time is on their side. And yet, week after week, something continues to happen. New ships leave American shipyards, quietly, without announcement, without ceremony. They do not arrive all at once. They do not make headlines, but they keep coming. One more destroyer, one more cruiser, one more carrier under construction. Each one a small addition, each one easy to dismiss on its own, until they begin to form a pattern that is not yet fully visible, but is already impossible to stop. February 27th, 1942, 4:15 p.m., Java Sea north of Surabaya. The sky is heavy with humidity, the air thick enough that every breath feels slower than it should. On the bridge of the Esther Reiter. Rear Admiral Carol Dorman grips the railing as binoculars remain fixed toward the northern horizon. Sweat gathers along his collar, but his voice remains steady. All ships maintain formation, he orders. We engage at range. Below him, engines throb through the hull, a deep mechanical pulse that echoes with urgency. Around him, an improvised Allied fleet moves in uncertain coordination. Dutch, British, American, Australian ships, all trying to function as one force. It is not smooth, it is not perfect, but it is resistance. Miles away aboard the IJN Nachi, Vice Admiral Takeo Takagi stands in calm control. His fleet is disciplined, experienced, and confident. Japanese lookouts have already reported the approaching enemy formation. Takagi lowers his binoculars slightly. They are disorganized, he says. An officer beside him nods. A mixed force, different signals, different doctrine. Takagi allows himself a faint smile. Then this will be brief. The assumption feels natural. Every engagement so far has reinforced it. Across the Java Sea, the Allied formation struggles to maintain cohesion. Signal flags rise and fall. Radio transmissions overlap and occasionally conflict. Smoke trails stretch across the water as ships adjust position. You can hear it inside the radio room. Repeat. Last command. Unable to confirm signal. Maintain bearing. The tension is constant, and yet they do not retreat. At 4:30 p.m., the first shells are fired. A distant flash from the Japanese line. Seconds later, towering columns of water erupt near the Allied ships. The sound arrives a moment after the impact, a deep rolling thunder that vibrates through the decks. The battle has begun. Takagi watches carefully as his gunners adjust their aim with practiced efficiency. Range calculations are corrected in seconds. Salvos tighten with each correction. Maintain pressure, he orders. His confidence is absolute. But something unexpected happens. The Allied ships do not break immediately. Instead, they press forward. American destroyers surge ahead, cutting through the water at high speed. Smoke screens begin to form thick gray clouds spreading across the surface, obscuring visibility. Lieutenant Commander John D. Ford aboard the USS. John D. Ford DD 228 leans forward as his ship accelerates. "Prepare torpedoes," he shouts. Crew members move quickly, hands steady despite the chaos around them. Tubes are aligned, angles calculated. Fire when ready. A moment later, the destroyer releases its weapons. Long silver shapes vanish beneath the surface, racing toward the Japanese formation. Takagi's expression shifts slightly. "Torpedo alert," an officer calls out. The Japanese ships begin evasive maneuvers, turning sharply to avoid the incoming threat. The formation adjusts, momentarily disrupted. It is not enough to change the outcome, but it is enough to create friction, enough to delay, enough to show something Takagi did not expect. Persistence. Back on De Ruyter, Admiral Dorman watches as the engagement intensifies. Shells fall closer now. One strike hits a nearby cruiser, sending a burst of flame and debris into the air. Still, the line holds. "Keep attacking," Dorman says. His voice carries no illusion of victory, only determination. The battle stretches on longer than anticipated. Japanese firepower remains superior. Coordination remains sharper. One by one, Allied ships begin to suffer heavy damage. But they do not collapse instantly. Each minute gained is a minute not predicted. Each maneuver forces a reaction. Each torpedo demands attention. Takagi observes the unfolding fight with increasing focus. "This is unexpected," he admits quietly. "Not dangerous, not yet, but different. The Allied force is not acting like a defeated enemy. It is acting like one that refuses to accept defeat." As the sun begins to lower, the battle reaches its decisive phase. Japanese torpedoes find their mark. A violent explosion tears through the De Ruyter, flames erupting along its midsection. The ship shudders, then begins to slow. Admiral Dorman remains on the bridge. He does not leave. The order is given one last time. Attack. Then the ship is lost. Across the sea, other Allied vessels follow. The battle ends as expected. Japanese victory is clear. The ocean settles once more into uneasy calm, broken only by burning wreckage and drifting debris. Takagi stands on the bridge of Nachi, watching the aftermath. "Enemy force destroyed," an officer reports. He nods. But his gaze lingers on the horizon longer than before. Because something about this engagement does not fit the pattern he has come to trust. The enemy was disorganized. Yes. Inferior. Yes. But not passive. Not collapsing. Not broken in the way they were supposed to be. Far across the Pacific, in shipyards and factories, that same pattern is becoming clearer. Production lines move faster. Designs are simplified. Processes refined. Each lesson learned is applied immediately. Ships are not just being built. They are being built better, faster, and in greater numbers. Back in Tokyo, reports of the Battle of the Java Sea are received with approval. A successful engagement. Another confirmation. Another reinforcement of belief. But buried within the details are small inconsistencies. Timelines that stretched longer than predicted. Enemy actions that were more aggressive than expected. Resistance that did not align with assumptions. These details are noted, then set aside, because they do not change the outcome. And outcomes for now still favor Japan. Yet the first cracks have appeared. Not in ships, not in weapons, but in expectation. And once expectation begins to shift even slightly, everything built upon it becomes less certain. The ocean is still vast. The enemy still appears distant, but the idea that they are weakening has begun to fracture, quietly, almost invisibly, but it has begun. April 18th, 1942. 7:38 OM North Pacific Ocean. 650 miles east of Japan. Wind tears across the flight deck of the USS Hornet, sea-vate whipping jackets and signal flags into violent motion. The sea below is restless gray waves slamming against the hull as the carrier pushes forward at full speed. You can hear the engines straining beneath your feet, a deep, continuous vibration that never settles. On deck, something unusual waits. 16. North American WWII 25. Mitchell bombers sit lined up in tight formation, their wings spanning nearly the entire width of the deck. They are too large for carrier operations. Too heavy, too long, and yet they are here. Lieutenant Colonel James H. Doolittle stands near the lead aircraft goggles, resting against his helmet eyes, scanning the horizon. His voice is calm, but every man around him understands the risk. "We launch now," he says. An officer nearby hesitates. "Sir, we are still outside planned range." Doolittle nods once. "We do not have a choice." Moments earlier, a Japanese picket boat had been sighted. That single contact changes everything. Surprise is gone. Timing is broken. The mission must begin immediately. You can feel the tension spread across the deck as crews move into position. Engines roar to life, one by one, each bomber shaking violently as power builds. Rear Admiral Mark Mitcher watches from the island, expression tight. "Get them off," he orders. There is no margin for delay, no margin for error. The first B-25 rolls forward. The deck looks impossibly short. The ocean ahead looks impossibly far. For a moment, the aircraft seems to hesitate. Then it accelerates. The roar becomes deafening. The nose lifts. Wheels leave the deck. And somehow, against expectation, it climbs. One by one, the bombers follow. Each takeoff is a gamble. Each successful launch defies what should be possible. Far across the Pacific in Tokyo, the morning begins quietly. Civilians move through streets with routine familiarity. Military offices open. Reports are sorted. The war still feels distant, contained. At 12:15 p.m., that illusion breaks. Air raid sirens cut through the city. At first, there is confusion. Then disbelief. Enemy aircraft over Tokyo. It does not make sense. It cannot make sense. On the ground, anti-aircraft crews scramble to position their guns. Officers shout orders that overlap and contradict. Altitude estimate. Direction unknown. Engage immediately. Above them, the B-25s appear through scattered cloud cover. They are not numerous. They are not heavily armed, but they are there. That fact alone is enough to shatter assumptions. Bombs fall across industrial districts, military installations, and urban areas. Explosions ripple through the city, sending smoke rising into the sky. The damage is limited, but the impact is not. Inside military headquarters, officers gather in urgent confusion. How did they reach us? One demands, from where another asks. There is no immediate answer, because the answer challenges everything they believed. The Pacific Ocean was supposed to be a barrier. Distance was supposed to be protection. And yet, American aircraft have just struck the Japanese homeland. Admiral Yamamoto receives the report in silence. He does not react outwardly, but those around him notice the change. Because this is not about damage. This is about possibility. If bombers can reach Tokyo once, they can reach it again. If carriers can approach undetected, then the perimeter is not secure. And if the perimeter is not secure, then the entire strategy begins to unravel. Elsewhere, Japanese commanders begin searching for explanations. Some point to intelligence failure, others to poor coordination. But beneath those discussions lies a deeper issue: underestimation. At sea, the Hornet and its escorting ships turn away at high speed, retreating eastward. The mission is complete. But the consequences are only beginning. Rear Admiral Mitcher watches the horizon as the last aircraft disappears from view. "Now they know," an officer says quietly. Mitcher nods. Good, because this strike was never about destruction. It was about forcing a reaction, and that reaction comes quickly. Within days, Japanese naval planning shifts. A new objective emerges. Locate and destroy the remaining American carriers. Eliminate the threat at its source. Admiral Yamamoto outlines the plan with careful precision. A decisive battle. A trap. Lure the American fleet into engagement near Midway Atoll. Destroy it completely. End the war on favorable terms. The confidence returns, but it is different now. Less casual. More urgent. Because something has changed. The Americans are no longer seen as passive. They are now seen as unpredictable, dangerous in ways that had not been anticipated. Yet even as this realization takes hold, another misjudgment forms. The belief that one decisive battle can still resolve everything. The belief that American losses will break their will. The belief that their industrial capacity, no matter how large, cannot compensate for a destroyed fleet. In shipyards across the United States, that belief is already becoming outdated. Production accelerates further. Designs are standardized. Assembly lines are refined. Ships are no longer built one at a time. They are built in sequence, in rhythm, in numbers that begin to blur. Back in Tokyo, planning for Midway continues with confidence restored. Because the response to surprise is not doubt. It is escalation. And escalation built on flawed assumptions carries its own consequences. The stage is set. The trap is prepared. And both sides are moving toward a confrontation that will test not just strategy, but the very assumptions each nation has built its war upon. June 4th, 1942. 4:30 a.m. North Pacific Ocean, northeast of Midway Atoll. The air is cold, sharp against exposed skin. On the bridge of the IJN Akagi, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo stands, rigid binoculars raised toward the dim horizon. The sky is just beginning to lighten, a thin band of gray separating ocean from cloud. Below him, the flight deck is alive with motion. You can hear engines coughing to life. The metallic clatter of ordnance being loaded. The shouted commands of deck crews working with practiced precision. Mitsubishi. A-6M0 fighters line one side of the deck. Nakajima B-5N torpedo bombers and Aichi D-3. A dive bombers are positioned carefully, each aircraft prepared for the strike against Midway. Launch the first wave. Nagumo orders. There is no hesitation. Aircraft begin to roll forward one after another, lifting into the early morning sky. The operation unfolds exactly as planned. Everything feels controlled. Everything feels certain. Hundreds of miles away, inside a dimly lit room at Midway, Lieutenant Commander Joseph Rochefort adjusts his headset, listening to fragments of intercepted Japanese transmissions. Carrier strike group confirmed, he says quietly. Around him, intelligence officers exchange quick glances. The information they worked weeks to piece together is now becoming reality. Admiral Chester. Nimitz had trusted these signals, had gambled on them, and now American carriers are already in position, waiting. Back on the Akagi, the first reports from the strike arrive. Midway defenses active. Enemy aircraft engaging. Request second strike to neutralize remaining installations. Nagumo listens carefully. The initial attack has not fully achieved its objective. This was not unexpected, but it creates a decision. Rearm the aircraft for a second strike on Midway, or prepare them for a possible naval engagement. The choice seems simple. There is no confirmed report of American carriers. Nagumo turns to his staff. Prepare for second strike on Midway. Below deck ordnance, crews begin to move. Bombs are replaced. Fuel lines reconnected. Aircraft are reconfigured for land attack. It is a complex process, one that takes time. Time that feels available. Time that seems safe. Then at 7:28 a.m., a message arrives. Enemy ships sighted. The room stills. Nagumo lowers his binoculars slowly. Details, he demands. The response comes back incomplete. Possibly cruisers and destroyers. No mention of carriers. Uncertainty fills the gap. Nagumo hesitates, just long enough for the moment to begin slipping. Hold rearming, he orders. Prepare to switch to anti-ship configuration. Below deck, the process reverses. Bombs are removed. Torpedoes prepared. Fuel lines disconnected and reconnected again. The hangar decks become crowded with aircraft in transition. Armed, fueled, vulnerable. On the American side of the ocean, the USS Enterprise, CV-6 and USS Yorktown CV-5 move silently through the water. On Enterprise, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey stands on the flight deck watching as his squadron prepares for launch. Target confirmed, an officer says. McCluskey nods once. Launch everything. Aircraft begin to rise into the sky. Dive bombers. Torpedo planes. Fighters. Each one carrying the weight of a decision made far from this moment. Back on Akagi, tension grows. Reports remain incomplete, conflicting. The absence of clear information creates delay, and delay creates exposure. At 9:20 a.m., Japanese lookouts finally reported. Enemy carrier sighted. The words land with quiet finality. Nagumo does not speak immediately, because in that instant everything changes. All the earlier assumptions, all the calculations, all the confidence, they no longer apply. Launch strike immediately, he orders, but it is too late for immediate action. Aircraft are not ready. Decks are cluttered. Fuel hoses still connected. Ordnance still being moved. The fleet is caught between decisions. Caught in transition. Above the fleet, American aircraft are already approaching. You can hear them before you see them. A distant growing roar. Then, shapes emerge through the clouds. At 10:22 a.m., the first bombs fall. SBD Dauntless dive bombers descend almost vertically, engines screaming as they drop toward their targets. On Akagi, sailors look up just seconds before impact. There is no time to react. The first bomb strikes near the midsection, piercing the flight deck and detonating among fueled aircraft below. Fire erupts instantly. A chain reaction. Explosions ripple through the hangar deck. Fuel ignites. Ammunition cooks off. Within moments, the ship is engulfed. Nearby, I.J.N. Kaga and I.J.N. Soryu suffer similar fates. 3 carriers, struck within minutes, set ablaze. Their decks transformed from launch platforms into infernos. Nagumo stands frozen for a moment, watching the destruction unfold. This was not supposed to happen. This was not possible. And yet, it is happening. In real time, irreversible. On the American carriers, reports come in rapidly. Direct hits confirmed. Enemy carriers burning. Minimal resistance. The tone is controlled, but beneath it lies something else. Recognition that this moment is not just a victory. It is a shift, a turning point. Back on Akagi, damage control efforts begin immediately. Hoses are deployed. Teams move into smoke-filled compartments. But the fires are too intense, too widespread. Captain Taijiro Aoki gives the order to abandon ship hours later. The carrier that once led the Pearl Harbor attack is now lost. One by one, the remaining carriers follow. The Japanese strike force is shattered, and with it, something deeper begins to break. The belief in control, the belief in predictability, the belief that one decisive battle would end the war on their terms. Instead, this battle has done something else. It has revealed that the enemy is not weakening, not slowing, but adapting faster than expected, producing more than expected, arriving where they were not supposed to be. And for the first time, that realization cannot be ignored. June 4th, 1942. 1:10 p.m. North Pacific Ocean, near Midway Atoll. Smoke towers into the sky in thick black columns. From miles away, you can see it rising where the heart of the Kido Butai once moved with perfect coordination. Now the formation is broken. Fire spreads across the water where aircraft fuel and wreckage burn together in drifting patches. On the bridge of the IJN Hiryu, Captain Tomio Kaku grips the edge of the chart table as new reports arrive in rapid succession. Akagi lost. Kaga lost. Soryu burning beyond recovery. Each message lands heavier than the last. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo has transferred command, his authority now reduced to fragments of what it was just hours earlier. The once dominant strike force has been reduced to a single operational carrier. Hiryu, alone. Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi stands near the flight deck access. His posture rigid, his voice controlled, but urgent. "We still have aircraft," he says. "We strike back immediately." There is no hesitation in him, no pause to consider retreat, because retreat is not part of the plan. It never was. Below-deck aircraft crews move with renewed intensity. Fuel lines are connected with shaking hands. Ordnance is loaded faster than safety would normally allow. You can hear the tension in every movement. Metal. Striking metal. Voices raised just slightly above normal. The controlled precision of earlier hours replaced by urgency that borders on desperation. "Launch the first wave," Yamaguchi orders. Moments later, dive bombers rise from Hiryu's deck, engines roaring as they climb into the sky. Their target is already known. The American carriers. The ones that should not have been here. The ones that have already destroyed 3 of Japan's finest ships. Miles away aboard the USS Yorktown C5, 5 damage control teams move with disciplined speed. Earlier attacks had already struck the ship, but repairs were underway. Smoke still lingers along parts of the deck, but operations continue. You can hear the controlled rhythm of American response. Hose pressure steady. Compartment sealed. Damage contained. Captain Elliot Buckmaster stands on the bridge, watching as crew members restore function piece by piece. "We are still in this," he says quietly. And for a moment it appears true. At 2:38 p.m., the sky changes. Japanese aircraft descend through broken clouds, their silhouettes sharp against the light. Enemy dive bombers incoming. The warning spreads across Yorktown. Gunners move into position. Anti-aircraft fire erupts, filling the air with bursts of smoke and steel. The sound is overwhelming. Rapid-fire guns. Explosions in the sky. Engines screaming as aircraft dive. You can feel the vibration through the deck as bombs fall. One strikes near the center of the carrier. Another hits close behind. The ship shudders violently. Flames erupt. Smoke pours upward, but Yorktown does not sink. Not yet. Damage control teams respond immediately. Fire is contained. Systems are restored. The ship continues to function. From a distance, it even appears operational. Back on Hiryu, reports come in. Enemy carrier hit. Significant damage observed. Yamaguchi listens carefully. "How many carriers remain?" he asks. The answer is uncertain. Possibly 2. Possibly more. That uncertainty becomes a problem, because it means the battle is not over. Because it means the enemy still has strength. And because it means time is no longer an ally. Yamaguchi makes a decision. We launch again. The second strike prepares quickly. Aircraft are fueled. Torpedoes secured. Pilots briefed with incomplete information. There is no time for clarity. Only action. At 4:30 p.m., the second wave departs Hiryu. They fly low over the ocean engines, steady, searching for targets that may have already moved. On the American side, radar operators track incoming signals. New contacts approaching. Orders are issued instantly. Prepare, intercept. Fighters rise to meet the threat. The sky becomes a battlefield again. Japanese aircraft press forward, determined to complete their mission. They find Yorktown once more. Still afloat. Still operational enough to be a target. Torpedoes are released. They cut through the water with deadly precision. 2 strikes hit the carrier's side. The impact is devastating. The ship lists sharply. Power begins to fail. This time recovery is not possible. Captain Buckmaster looks across the deck as the tilt increases. He understands what it means. Abandon ship, he orders. Crew members move quickly, but without panic. They have done everything they could. Now the ship must be left behind. Back on Hiryu, confirmation arrives. Enemy carrier disabled. Yamaguchi nods once. For a brief moment, something like balance seems restored. 3 Japanese carriers lost. 1 American carrier heavily damaged. The exchange feels closer, more even. But that feeling does not last, because as evening approaches, another report arrives. Enemy aircraft inbound. Yamaguchi looks toward the horizon. There should not be more aircraft. There should not be another strike. And yet the sound begins to grow. A distant roar, familiar, unavoidable. American dive bombers descend from high altitude, emerging through the fading light. They have found Hiryu, the last carrier, the last piece of the original plan. At 5 p.m., bombs fall. 1 strikes near the forward deck. Another hits close to the island. Explosions tear through the ship. Fire spreads rapidly. The deck becomes a chaos of flame and smoke. Yamaguchi stands still as the reality settles around him. This is the end of the strike force. Not in theory, not in projection, but here, now, irreversible. As the sun begins to set, the ocean reflects the fires of 4 carriers burning across its surface. The most powerful naval force in the Pacific has been broken in a single day. And in the silence that follows, something else begins to take shape. Not victory, not defeat, but confusion. Because what was believed to be certain is now gone, and nothing has yet replaced it. June 5, 1942. 6:20 a.m. Pacific Ocean, west of Midway Atoll. The ocean is quieter now. Smoke still drifts across the horizon in long fading streaks, remnants of fires that burned through the night. Pieces of wreckage float in slow motion, carried by currents that do not care what was lost here. On the bridge of the IJN Yamato, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto stands in silence. The largest battleship ever built cuts steadily through the water, its engines powerful, its guns untouched, its armor untested. And yet it has arrived too late. A signal officer approaches carefully, holding a message that has already been read twice before reaching this point. Report from Vice Admiral Nagumo's force, he says. Yamamoto takes the paper. He reads it once, then again. 4 carriers lost, air groups destroyed, survivors scattered. The words are precise. The meaning is absolute. Behind him, officers wait. No one speaks, because there is nothing to clarify, nothing to reinterpret. The plan has collapsed. Not partially, not temporarily, completely. Hours earlier, that plan had still existed in fragments. The idea that regrouping was possible, that remaining forces could be concentrated, that a counterattack might still be organized. But those fragments are gone now, because without carriers, there is no way to project power, no way to strike at range, no way to control the battle space. Yamamoto lowers the paper slowly. "Order a general withdrawal," he says. The words are quiet, but they carry the weight of finality. Across the fleet, the order spreads. Ships begin to turn. Formation dissolves. The offensive posture shifts into retreat. For the first time since the war began, the direction is reversed. Back near the wreckage of the carrier force, destroyers move carefully through the water. On the deck of the IJN Makigumo, sailors stand at attention as they receive the final order regarding the burning hulk of Hiryu. Scuttling charges are prepared. Captain Tomo Kaku watches as the last surviving crew members are transferred off the ship. Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi remains aboard. He has chosen not to leave. The fires continue to spread. The deck is twisted, blackened, barely recognizable. As the charges are set, there is no ceremony, only procedure. At 9 a.m., the explosions tear through what remains of Hiryu. The ship begins to sink, slowly, deliberately, taking with it the last operational carrier of the strike force. Nearby, other destroyers carry survivors away from the scene, burned, exhausted, silent. No one speaks about what has been lost, because it is too large to process. Miles away, American aircraft continue to patrol. Search patterns extend across the ocean looking for any remaining targets. On the deck of the USS Enterprise CY-6, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey stands watching the horizon. "Any sign of regrouping?" he asks. An officer shakes his head. "No organized formation detected." McCluskey nods. They are pulling back. The realization spreads quietly across the ship, not through celebration, but through understanding. This is not a temporary retreat. This is the end of an offensive. Back on Yamato, Yamamoto remains on the bridge as the fleet withdraws. An officer approaches with a question that has no good answer. "Admiral, should we attempt to re-engage if contact is made?" Yamamoto does not look at him immediately, because the answer is already clear. "No," he says. The fleet no longer has the means. No air cover, no reconnaissance, no ability to locate or strike the enemy at distance. The advantage that once defined their strategy is gone. And without it, everything else becomes vulnerable. As the ships continue westward, the scale of the loss becomes more apparent. Aircraft that will not return, pilots that cannot be replaced quickly, carriers that took years to build, gone in a single day. And across the Pacific, something else continues to happen. Shipyards remain active. Production lines continue without interruption. New hulls take shape. New crews begin training. The rhythm does not slow. It does not pause. It continues forward, unaware of individual battles, focused only on output. Back in Tokyo, the first detailed reports begin to arrive. They are incomplete, fragmented, but the pattern is clear. A disaster, not just a defeat, a structural loss. Meetings are called, explanations demanded. But no explanation can change the outcome, because the outcome has already reshaped the future. The original plan had depended on a single decisive battle, a controlled engagement, a predictable outcome. But that plan no longer exists. It has been replaced by something else, uncertainty. On the deck of Yamato, Yamamoto looks out over the open ocean. For the first time, the Pacific does not feel like a barrier. It feels exposed, open, vulnerable in ways it never had before. Because now he understands something that had only been a distant concern. The enemy is not diminishing. The enemy is increasing. And the loss of 4 carriers does not reduce that threat. It amplifies it, because it cannot be matched. Not quickly, not easily, perhaps not at all. The fleet continues its withdrawal. Engines steady, course fixed, no longer advancing, no longer seeking engagement, only moving away. And with every mile, the original vision of the war fades further behind them, replaced by a reality that no one had planned for, and no one is prepared to face. August 7th, 1942. 6:55 a.m. Lunga Point, Guadalcanal. The air is thick with heat and humidity pressing down on everything that moves. Palm trees sway lightly along the shoreline, their leaves catching the early sunlight. For a brief moment, the island feels still, almost untouched. Then the first explosions begin. Naval gunfire crashes inland from the seashells tearing through the quiet with violent precision. The ground shakes as impacts ripple across the jungle edge. Smoke rises quickly, drifting upward through the dense green canopy. Offshore, the silhouettes of American warships stretch across the horizon. Cruisers, destroyers, transports, and above them, aircraft circle in controlled patterns. On the bridge of the US Quincy, 39. Captain Samuel N. Moore watches the bombardment unfold. "Keep the pressure steady," he orders. His voice remains calm, but the scale of the operation is unmistakable. This is not a raid. This is an arrival. Landing craft begin to move toward the shore, their engines buzzing across the water. Marines sit packed inside rifles, held tight, faces set with focus. You can hear the rhythm of preparation. Check your gear. Stay low. Move fast when the ramp drops. As the first boats hit the sand, the reality of the war shifts again. Guadalcanal becomes the next point of collision. Miles away inside the Japanese command structures, the reports arrive with urgency. Enemy landing confirmed. Multiple ships. Air support present. The reaction is immediate. Because this was not supposed to happen. Not here. Not so soon. In Rabaul, Lieutenant General Harukichi Hayakutake listens as the situation is outlined. His staff speaks quickly, outlining troop strengths, supply estimates, and possible responses. "We can reinforce," an officer says. "We must push them back before they establish control." Hayakutake nods. "Prepare immediate counterattack." The decision is made without hesitation, because delay now carries risk, because every hour allows the Americans to strengthen their position. And because the belief still exists that decisive action can reverse the situation. At sea, Japanese naval forces begin to mobilize. Fast cruisers, destroyers, submarines. They move with urgency, forming strike groups designed to disrupt the American presence. Night operations are planned. Rapid strikes. Supply runs under darkness. The effort becomes known in quiet terms among sailors. The Tokyo Express. Fast, aggressive, relentless. On the American side, construction begins almost immediately. At Henderson Field, Marines work under constant pressure, clearing debris, repairing runways, preparing for aircraft that will soon arrive. You can hear the scrape of tools against earth, the grind of engines, the constant awareness that the enemy is close. Because they are. At night, Japanese ships approach, engines cut to reduce noise, silhouettes moving across the dark water. On August 9th, the first major clash unfolds, near Savo Island. The night is thick, visibility limited. On the bridge of the IJN Shokai Vice, Admiral Gunichi Mikawa directs his force with precision. "Maintain silence," he orders. His ships move undetected. Closing distance. Positioning for attack. On the American side, patrols are active but stretched. Radar coverage is incomplete. Coordination is still developing. At 1:43 a.m., the first flares illuminate the sky. Moments later, gunfire erupts. Japanese cruisers unleash devastating salvos at close range. Shells slam into Allied ships with brutal efficiency. The USS Astoria, CA-34, is struck repeatedly. Fires break out across its decks. Nearby, USS Quincy, CA-39, and USS Vincennes, CA-44, suffer similar fates. The night becomes chaos. Explosions, burning ships, confusion in command. Japanese forces achieve a stunning tactical victory. They withdraw before dawn, leaving destruction behind. Back in Japanese command, the result is received with renewed confidence. Enemy losses significant. Operation successful. For a moment, it feels like recovery. Like momentum can be regained. Like the balance can be restored. But something crucial is missing. The American transports at Guadalcanal are not destroyed. The landing force remains. The airfield remains under construction. The opportunity for complete disruption was there, but it was not taken. Because caution intervened, because assumptions still lingered, that the Americans could be pushed out later. That time was still available, and time once again begins to shift. At Henderson Field, aircraft begin to arrive. Fighters, dive bombers. They operate under constant threat, but they operate. Each day, the American position strengthens. Supplies arrive. Reinforcements land. Coordination improves. And offshore, something continues to happen. New ships appear. Destroyers escort convoys. Cruisers provide support. Carriers move in distant patterns. The presence grows. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. Back in Japanese planning rooms, new operations are drawn up. More reinforcements, more night attacks, more attempts to dislodge the enemy. Each plan is aggressive. Each plan assumes that success is still possible. But beneath those plans lies a growing problem. Losses are harder to replace. Pilots are fewer. Ships take longer to repair. And across the ocean, the enemy continues to build, continues to arrive, continues to expand. The effort to recover what was lost begins to stretch resources thin, because recovery is no longer about regaining position. It is about preventing further loss. And even that becomes uncertain. As the nights grow longer over Guadalcanal, the rhythm of battle settles into something relentless. Attack, counterattack, supply, interception. Each cycle erodes strength. Each cycle favors the side that can replace what it loses. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the balance begins to tilt, not because of one battle, not because of one decision, but because of what cannot be replaced fast enough, and what continues to arrive without stopping. November the 14th, 1942. 2:25 a.m. Iron bottom sound of Guadalcanal. Darkness presses against the water like a weight. Cloud cover hides the moon, leaving only faint outlines of ships moving through narrow channels of black ocean. The air is thick, humid, filled with the smell of oil smoke and cordite that never fully fades from this place. You can hear engines at low power, steel cutting through water, men speaking in hushed tones as if volume alone might give away position. On the bridge of the IJN Kirishima, Vice Admiral Nobutake Kondo watches the darkness ahead, binoculars raised, though visibility is almost nothing. Maintain formation, he orders. Around him, Japanese forces move carefully into position. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers. The objective is clear. Bombard Henderson Field. Crush the air power that has turned this island into a barrier. Because that airfield has become something more than a strip of land. It has become a constant threat. Every daylight hour, aircraft rise from it. Every daylight hour, ships approaching the island are exposed, and every attempt to reinforce Guadalcanal becomes more difficult. This operation is meant to change that, to break the pattern, to restore control. But the pattern is already shifting. Across the water, American ships wait. On the bridge of the USS Washington BB-56, Captain Glenn B. Davis stands beside Rear Admiral Willis Ali. Inside the Combat Information Center, radar screens glow faintly green lines sweeping across darkness that human eyes cannot penetrate. Contact bearing 080 and operator reports. Lee nods. Track and hold. This is different from earlier battles. This is not confusion. This is not guesswork. This is detection before sight. Japanese ships continue forward, unaware of how precisely they are being watched. Kondo believes he has the advantage, because he still sees the battle through familiar terms. Guns, armor, night maneuver. But something else is now part of the fight. Something that does not rely on visibility. Something that does not reveal itself until it is too late. At 11:17 p.m., hours earlier, the first engagement had already begun. Now, in the deep hours of the night, the second phase unfolds. The American battleship Washington moves silently, guided by radar. Target locked before the enemy even knows it is being tracked. Open fire, Lee orders. The first salvo erupts from Washington's main guns. 16-inch shells tear through the darkness, invisible until impact. Seconds later, explosions rip into Kirishima. The effect is immediate, shocking, unexpected. On Kirishima, officers react in confusion. Where did that come from? Range, direction. There is no clear answer. Because the attack did not follow the rules they expected. More shells strike, precision increasing with each salvo. Fire spreads across the deck. Systems begin to fail. Kondo watches as the situation changes faster than he can process. Return fire, he orders. But return fire requires... And sight is limited. American radar removes that limitation. The imbalance becomes clear within minutes. Kirishima is struck repeatedly. Critical damage accumulates. Steering compromised. Fires spreading beyond control. Nearby, Japanese ships attempt to respond, but coordination begins to break down. Signals overlap. Orders conflict. The battle becomes fragmented. On Washington, the process remains controlled. Adjust bearing. Target confirmed. Fire. Each command leads directly to action. Each action produces results. There is no hesitation, no uncertainty. Because the information is clear, because the system works, and because it has been integrated into every decision. Back on Kirishima, the realization begins to take shape. Not suddenly, but in pieces. The enemy is not just present. The enemy is operating differently, more effectively, more precisely, and more consistently. Kondo watches as another explosion tears through the ship. He understands what it means. This is not a temporary disadvantage. This is a shift, one that cannot be corrected in the moment, one that cannot be countered with courage or experience alone. As the battle continues, Japanese forces begin to withdraw. Kirishima is left behind, burning, crippled, beyond recovery. By dawn, the ship is abandoned. It sinks slowly beneath the surface, joining the growing number of wrecks that give Iron Bottom Sound its name. Across the water, American forces hold position. Henderson Field remains intact. Aircraft will fly again at first light. The objective has failed. And with it, something deeper begins to settle. Not just the loss of a ship, not just the failure of an operation, but the recognition of a pattern that can no longer be ignored. Each battle follows the same direction. Initial confidence, aggressive action, temporary success, then disruption, then loss. And behind that pattern, something constant. American presence, increasing, expanding. Ships appearing where they were not expected. Forces arriving faster than predicted. Systems improving with each engagement. On the Japanese side, replacements come slower. Losses accumulate. Adjustments are made, but they do not close the gap. Because the gap is not just tactical. It is structural. It is industrial. It is continuous. Back in command, discussions officers begin to speak differently. Not openly, not formally, but in quieter tones. How many ships do they have now? How quickly can they replace losses? What happens if this continues? The questions do not have reassuring answers, because the answers point in one direction, a direction that was never part of the original plan. As the sun rises over Guadalcanal, the battlefield reveals itself. Wreckage scattered across the water, smoke drifting into the morning sky, survivors moving among debris. And beyond it all, the steady presence of ships that were not supposed to be here in such numbers. Not this soon. Not this often. The realization does not arrive as a single moment. It builds, layer by layer, battle by battle, until it can no longer be dismissed. Until it becomes undeniable. The enemy is not slowing. The enemy is not weakening. The enemy is growing. And the war that was supposed to be decided quickly has become something else entirely. Something longer. Something heavier, something that cannot be controlled in the way it once was imagined. February 17th, 1944, 10:12 a.m., Truck Lagoon, Caroline Islands. The sky is filled with aircraft. You can hear them before you see them. A constant layered roar, engines overlapping in waves, some high above the clouds, others descending fast towards targets already burning below. The air vibrates with motion that does not pause. On the deck of the IJN Hoyo Maru, crew members look upward, shielding their eyes against the glare. At first, there is confusion, then recognition, then something else, acceptance. Because this is no longer unexpected. This is no longer surprising. This is the continuation of a pattern that has been building for more than 2 years. Above them, American aircraft circle in organized layers. Grumman F-6F. Hellcat fighters sweep ahead. Curtiss SB-2. C. Helldiver dive bombers line up for attack runs. Grumman TBF Avenger. Torpedo bombers move low over the water, steady and precise. Each group moves with coordination that feels practiced, almost routine. On the bridge of the USS Enterprise, Sieve 6 Rear Admiral Mark Mitcher watches the operation unfold. Strike groups report. Ready, an officer says. Mitcher nods. Proceed. His voice is calm, because this is no longer a gamble. This is execution. Below him, aircraft launch and recover in continuous cycles. Deck crews move with speed and certainty. Fuel lines connect and disconnect without hesitation. Ordnance is loaded and reloaded. There is no confusion, no delay, because the system has been refined through repetition, through experience, through the accumulation of lessons learned in earlier battles. Back in Truk Lagoon, explosions ripple across the anchorage. Ships that once served as the backbone of Japanese operations in the Central Pacific are struck repeatedly. Fuel depots erupt into flames. Aircraft on the ground are destroyed before they can take off. The lagoon, once considered a secure stronghold, becomes a confined space with no escape. On the bridge of the IJN, Agano officers move quickly as reports come in. Multiple enemy aircraft approaching from east and south. Damage reported across anchorage. Air cover insufficient. The words come too fast. The situation changes too quickly. There is no time to form a coordinated response, because the attack is not a single strike. It is continuous, wave after wave, hour after hour. Each new group of aircraft arrives before the previous one has fully cleared. On the deck, anti-aircraft guns fire relentlessly. Shell casings scatter across the surface. Barrels glow with heat. But the volume is not enough, because the number of incoming aircraft is too great, because the coordination is too precise, because the attackers are not limited. They keep coming, from multiple carriers, from multiple directions, in numbers that no longer feel manageable. A junior officer looks toward the horizon. How many are there? No one answers. Because counting has become meaningless. Because the question itself reflects something deeper. The scale has exceeded expectation. On shore, Japanese aircraft sit damaged or destroyed, unable to respond effectively. Pilots who once trained for decisive engagements now face overwhelming numbers. Fuel shortages limit sorties. Replacement aircraft are fewer. And those that do take off face an enemy that is faster, better coordinated, and more numerous. In command centers, communication becomes fragmented. Orders are issued, then revised, then overridden by events that move faster than decisions can be made. This is not a battle in the traditional sense. There is no clear line, no defined engagement. Only pressure, constant, unrelenting. Back on Enterprise, Mitchell receives updated reports. Multiple hits confirmed. Enemy shipping heavily damaged. Resistance decreasing. He listens without visible reaction. Because this outcome was expected, not hoped for, expected. And that expectation is the final difference. Years earlier, the assumption had been that America would weaken. That distance would slow response. That industrial capacity would take too long to translate into action. Now the result of those assumptions is visible across the lagoon. Ships burning, aircraft destroyed, facilities collapsing under repeated strikes. The cost is not limited to material. It extends to something less visible. Time. Because time has shifted sides. On the Japanese side, time now means loss. Each day reduces capacity. Each engagement removes resources that cannot be quickly replaced. On the American side, time means accumulation. More ships, more aircraft, more trained crews, more coordination. The balance does not remain steady. It moves, continuously, in one direction. On the deck of Hoyo Maru, the crew abandons ship as fire spreads beyond control. Lifeboats lower into the water. Men jump into the sea. The ship lists, then begins to settle. Another vessel joins the growing number of losses. Across Truk Lagoon, the same scene repeats, again and again and again. Each loss no longer stands alone. They form a sequence, a pattern that cannot be reversed, because the conditions that created it are still present and growing stronger. In Tokyo, reports arrive throughout the day. Each one confirms the scale of the attack, the extent of the damage, the inability to respond effectively. Meetings are held. Discussions begin. But the tone has changed. There is no longer talk of decisive victory. No expectation of quick resolution. Only acknowledgement of a situation that has moved beyond control. Not suddenly, but gradually. Through a series of moments that were not fully understood when they occurred. Early losses that seemed manageable. New ships that seemed insignificant. Engagements that appeared favorable. Until they combined. Until they revealed what had been building all along. Back over Truk Lagoon, the final waves of aircraft begin to withdraw. The sky slowly clears. The roar fades. What remains is smoke, fire, and silence. A silence that feels different. Heavier, because it is no longer filled with uncertainty. It is filled with understanding. The war that was expected to be short has become something else. Something that cannot be reversed. Something that cannot be negotiated away. something that has already moved beyond the point where decisions can change its direction. On the water, burning ships continue to sink, one after another, marking the end of what had once been believed certain.